Inside an ordinary hillside in southwestern France, 6 human bodies have been waiting almost 30,000 years to break one of archaeology's oldest rules. For decades, the assumption was simple. Ice Age people kept their art and their dead in 2 completely separate worlds. Paintings in one place, burial somewhere else, outside, apart. Inside this cave, the evidence says that's wrong. French heritage authorities have kept the site sealed since the day it was found, blocking every request to test the bones for DNA, terrified of repeating the mistake that destroyed one of France's most famous caves. The man who found it was a caver named Marc Deluc. In the year 2000, he crawled alone through a collapsed rockfall and came face to face with engraved animals and human bone in the same breath. He spent the rest of his life protecting what he'd found instead of profiting from it, and died in 2017 without ever learning the full answer to what it meant. This is the Grotte de Cussac in the Dordogne region of France, discovered in 2000, and still one of the most restricted caves on Earth. For most people, Ice Age art means Lascaux, bulls painted in ochre and black, discovered by teenagers in 1940. So famous the French government eventually shut it down to save it from its own visitors. Or Chauvet, older still, its lions and rhinos, forcing historians to rethink what early humans could do with a torch and a wall. Several decorated caves nearby carry UNESCO World Heritage status for exactly this kind of Ice Age imagery. For a century, archaeologists built their entire picture of Ice Age life on caves like these, caves where nobody ever found a body. Cussac was going to be different. It took 25 years for anyone to understand how different. Somebody had already tried to find it. 50 years earlier, prehistorian Denis Pironi, and later his own son, dug at almost this exact spot, searching for exactly this kind of cavity. They never broke through. The entrance sat a few meters from professional archaeologists for half a century, sealed by rockfall, waiting for an amateur cook and caver with a nose for moving air. On September 30th, 2000, Deluc felt a draft moving through solid rock, cleared the collapsed slabs blocking it, and pushed into a passage sealed for tens of thousands of years. He and the small group of cavers with him stayed on a single narrow strip of floor, careful not to step outside their own footprints, a decision that's part of the reason what they found still exists at all. What they found stopped them cold air pushing against their faces in the dark, a passage barely wide enough for shoulders, then a beam of light finding a wall that hadn't seen daylight in tens of thousands of years. Engraved animals cut deep into soft limestone, larger and more confident than almost anything comparable in France. And close by, tucked into low hollows in the rock, human bone. Not myth, not rumor. Bone, undisturbed, inside a cave sealed shut since the Ice Age. Deluc reported it immediately and kept the discovery exactly as unassuming as the man himself. No exclusive deal, no media tour, nothing beyond a report filed with the people whose job it was to protect it. Within weeks, the French Ministry of Culture had the file, and by December 8th, 2000, they'd announced it publicly. Legal protection followed almost immediately. That kind of speed doesn't happen for an ordinary discovery. Deluc kept working as a cook, kept caving on weekends, and died suddenly in December 2017 at 60 years old. The discovery he'd made barely a footnote in his own obituary. 25 years on, almost nobody outside a small research team has ever set foot in that cave. Not tourists, barely any journalists, not even most archaeologists. The reason isn't secrecy for its own sake. It's chemistry, and it's Lascaux's ghost. But before we get to why the door stayed shut, you need to see exactly what's behind it. Because what researchers found beneath those animal engravings didn't just complicate French prehistory. It broke a rule scientists had treated as settled for more than a century. Cussac sits in the Gravettian, its own distinct chapter of the Ice Age, separate from both Chauvet's far older Aurignacian and Lascaux's far younger Magdalenian, roughly 29,000 years old, and one of the periods that produced the most technically advanced art humans had made up to that point. Carved ivory figurines, sculpted female forms found from the Pyrenees to Siberia, a visual language specific enough that regional styles can be told apart almost like dialects. Cussac's engravings belong to a substyle researchers call Noaillian, deformed, elongated animal bodies, minimal anatomical detail, and a recurring pairing of bison and mammoth alongside female silhouettes, a combination that shows up in only a handful of other French caves, most famously Pitch Merrill, 100 kilometers away. The scale is what makes people who've actually stood inside it stop talking. More than 800 engravings have been documented across the cave's roughly mile-long length. Recent surveys push that count past 1,000. Bison dominate, cut with a confidence that leaves no room for a hesitant hand. One on what researchers call the Grand Panel stretches nearly 4 meters. Mammoths, horses, ibex, rhinoceros, deer, and birds appear again and again, alongside rarer female silhouettes. One nicknamed the Cussac Venus, carved in a part of the cave that sits within reach of curled human bone. Nobody has proven the two are connected on purpose, but in a cave where almost nothing turns out to be accidental, the proximity is hard to ignore. There's almost no paint here. This is a cave carved, not painted, sometimes called the engraved answer to Lascaux, except it's roughly 10,000 years older and belongs to a completely different artistic tradition. Now put the bodies back into that picture, because this is where the accepted story starts to wobble. At least 6 individuals, spread across 3 separate locations, deep inside the same cave that holds the engravings, not near the entrance, not walled off in some side passage, but woven directly into the decorated space itself. One nearly complete skeleton, a young adult, likely male, roughly 1 meter and 64 centimeters tall, was found face down, curled into a hollow that had originally been dug and lined by a very different resident, a cave bear, hibernating there thousands of years earlier. The humans didn't cut a fresh grave. They reused what was already there. Bear nests, repurposed as beds for the dead. Nowhere else in the archaeological record has anyone documented that practice. At a second location, remains from at least 2 more people were found sorted, rather than randomly discarded across 2 bear hollows. At a third deeper site, researchers cataloged over 100 bone fragments from 2 adults and an adolescent, split so that upper body bones were kept apart from lower body bones, as if someone had sorted the dead by anatomy on purpose. Sorted. That word should bother you. It means someone came back to bodies already decomposing and rearranged the pieces on purpose. Some skulls are missing entirely. Bones from different individuals turn up mixed together in the same tight space. There's red pigment on some of the bone and the sediment beneath it, the same red ochre used elsewhere in Ice Age Europe to mark the dead as significant. And something is missing that shouldn't be. No beads, no pierced shells, no carved ivory ornaments. Every other confirmed Gravettian burial found in France includes grave goods of some kind. Cussac's dead have none. Whoever performed this ritual followed almost none of the markers researchers expect from a Gravettian funeral. Inside a location no Gravettian funeral had ever used before. You'd expect a discovery this significant to be crawling with research teams every season. It isn't. Access to Cussac is among the tightest in French archaeology. Researchers are permitted inside for roughly 4 weeks a year in bursts of about 3 hours at a time before carbon dioxide building up in the passage becomes genuinely dangerous. Nothing gets removed, nothing gets excavated. Journalists rarely get near it at all. In February 2025, one of the only outside visits ever granted went to a small team from the news agency AFP, escorted by the region's chief heritage conservator, who described her role plainly: guarding and documenting the site, not showing it off. That restriction means some of the most basic questions about who these 6 people actually were, questions a modern lab can usually answer within weeks, have sat open for 25 years. So here's where the story usually splits in one of 2 directions. Either the placement of these bodies is coincidence, remains that fell, washed, or collapsed into the cave by accident, centuries or millennia apart from the art surrounding them. It's not a lazy theory. Caves flood. Ceilings collapse. For a discovery this strange, the boring explanation deserves a real hearing before anyone reaches for ritual and sanctuary. Or the placement isn't coincidence at all. Researchers needed a way to test that directly, without lifting a single bone off the ground. What they found didn't just answer the question, it raised the stakes considerably. The first tool was radiocarbon dating. Every living thing absorbs a radioactive form of carbon while it's alive, and the moment it dies, that carbon starts decaying at a fixed, known rate. Measure how much is left in a bone, and you get a window into how long ago that person died. A sample taken from one burial location returned a reading that calibrates to somewhere between 29 and 30,000 calendar years old. That number lines up almost exactly with the stylistic dating of the engravings on the surrounding walls. Same window. Not different eras that happened to share a cave. The people in the paintings appear to belong to the same stretch of time. One test complicated that picture. A rib bone from the near-complete skeleton dated to roughly 15,700 years. Thousands of years too recent to fit anything else in the cave. For a moment, that single number threatened to unravel the whole timeline. Had someone returned to the cave millennia later? The explanation turned out to be less dramatic, and just as revealing. That skeleton had been disturbed by flooding after burial, altering the bone's chemistry enough to throw off the result. Contamination, not a second visit. Researchers rely instead on the undisturbed samples and the art's own stylistic dating, both of which converge on the same window, roughly 29 to 28,000 years ago. But ruling out one theory didn't prove the placement was deliberate. For that, researchers needed a different kind of evidence entirely, built not around a lab machine but around geometry. It's called archaeothanatology, the study of exactly how a body was arranged at the moment of deposition, based on where each bone ends up relative to the others. A body placed intact and left undisturbed settles into a recognizable, coherent pattern. A body washed in with floodwater or dropped through a collapsing ceiling looks nothing like that. Scattered, randomly oriented, carrying the signature of water or gravity instead of human hands. Researchers mapped every bone at Cussac against that model. The pattern didn't match an accident. It matched deliberate placement, bodies laid or curled into position, largely left where they were originally set. Bioarchaeologist Sasha Kaki, describing the findings, put it plainly: the human remains indicate variable non-natural deposition and manipulation of human bodies, body portions, and skeletal elements of at least 6 individuals. Non-natural, that word is doing a lot of work. It means human hands did this, not gravity, not water, not chance. It means someone knelt in that exact spot 29,000 years ago, arranged a body with intention, and in some cases came back later to move the bones again. With excavation and physical sampling banned inside the cave, researchers turned to a technique that studies bone without touching it: photogrammetry. Thousands of overlapping photographs, stitched into precise 3-dimensional models, used to estimate age, sex, and stature for people they could never lift or measure with calipers. Researcher Eileen Schatzmans described the constraint directly. Research has to be conducted on site and only by observation, with no excavation allowed and nothing removed from the cave. There's no diet analysis either. The collagen sampling that would reveal what these 6 people actually ate requires grinding down bone, exactly like DNA extraction, and it's just as forbidden. Then, in 2021 came a detail almost nobody expected: footprints still pressed into ancient clay after 29,000 years, as if the trackway had been laid down last week. A team led by Jacques Joubert, working with specialists in ichnology, published findings in the journal Scientific Reports, dating the prints to the same window as the art and the bodies. Experimental reconstruction pointed to something specific. These people were likely wearing soft footwear when they walked through the cave, not barefoot, not careless. Deliberate, protected movement through a space they clearly understood mattered. Put those findings together, matching radiocarbon dates, deliberate bone placement, Careful footsteps through the same passages as the engravings, and the picture stops looking like coincidence. It starts looking like ceremony. This is the reversal that changes how you have to read everything that came before it. Joubert and his team argue that Cussac wasn't a decorated cave that happened to also contain bodies. It was, in his framing, offered as interpretation rather than settled fact, closer to a sanctuary, a single sacred space where making art and handling the dead belonged to the same ritual system. Kaki has stated it even more directly. Cussac is the first known cave where mortuary rites and cave art appear to be genuinely contemporaneous. Not merely located near each other. Contemporaneous, the same act or acts close enough in time and belief to belong to a single ceremony. That's a real reversal, not a marketing one. Before Cussac, every confirmed Gravettian burial in France had turned up outside, open ground, rock shelters, cave entrances. The idea that this same culture also carried its dead deep into total darkness, past its most sacred paintings, and deliberately left them there had no precedent anywhere in the record. The closest parallel, a partial skeleton found alongside art at a cave called Villeneuve, doesn't show the same tight link between remains and images that Cussac's dating, bone geometry, and footprints all point to at once. Joubert has gone one step further, and it's important to be honest about exactly where the evidence stands here. This part is a hypothesis, not a proven fact. He has suggested the cave may have hosted something resembling initiation ceremonies, pointing to the fact that the recovered individuals skew toward teenagers and adults, with no infants among them. It's a compelling reading of the pattern. It is not confirmed. There's one theory worth addressing head-on, because the moment people hear missing skulls, mixed bones, no grave goods, the word cannibalism tends to surface. Other Gravettian-era sites in Europe, Fornol in France, Burenkaya III in Crimea, showed genuine evidence of human bone-bearing cut marks consistent with defleshing for consumption. That practice existed in this period. But Cussac's bones don't show that pattern. Researchers examined the bone surfaces directly, looking for the same telltale cut marks. They aren't there. The manipulation here, missing crania, sorted and commingled remains, reads to researchers as mortuary handling, moving, curating, rearranging the dead as part of ritual, not butchering them for food. What actually happened at Cussac is strange enough without inventing the wrong kind of strange. So the science answered the biggest open question: were these deaths and this art genuinely connected, or was it all coincidence? And the evidence leans hard toward connected, but answering that question opened a much larger one. If 6 people were deliberately placed inside a decorated cave 29,000 years ago, who were they? What did they believe was happening to them or to the dead among them during that ceremony? Right now, nobody can answer that with certainty. And the reason why is almost as strange as the burial itself. 60 kilometers from Cussac sits the reason none of this cave will ever open to the public. Lascaux was discovered in 1940, became a global sensation almost overnight, and within 2 decades was dying. A greenish fungal bloom triggered by human breath, body heat, and artificial light, spreading across rock that had stayed chemically stable for 17,000 years until modern crowds arrived. France closed Lascaux to the public in 1963. It has never reopened. Every decision made about Cussac since 2000 has been made in the direct shadow of that failure. 4 weeks of research, access a year. No public visits ever planned. A cave that survived 30,000 years, sealed by natural rockfall, is now being sealed again, deliberately, by policy. And that policy carries a cost most people never stop to think about. There's one test that could answer almost everything you've just heard: who these 6 people really were, whether they were related to one another, how they connect to the broader map of Ice Age human migration across the continent. Ancient DNA analysis has already been done successfully on Gravettian remains at other French sites, full genomes recovered, ancestry mapped, family relationships reconstructed from people who died 30,000 years ago, all of it feeding into a growing genetic map of how Ice Age populations moved and vanished across the continent. Cussac's 6 individuals are a hole in that map, sitting exactly where the strangest behavioral evidence in the entire Gravettian record happens to be. Cussac's own research team includes genetic specialists fully capable of doing exactly that kind of work. They haven't. They can't. DNA extraction is destructive by nature. It requires grinding down and consuming a piece of the very bone under study. And the same heritage protections that saved Cussac's engravings from tourist damage, the same caution born directly out of watching Lascaux slowly die, also forbid removing so much as a fragment of bone from the cave. So 6 real Ice Age individuals, people who had names once, families, a place inside a ceremony we're only beginning to partly understand, remain genetically anonymous. Not because the science is incapable of identifying them, because the law protecting them from destruction is the exact same law that keeps them unknown. Who actually benefits from keeping Cussac sealed? Not the researchers. Every scientist connected to the project has said, on the record, that direct testing is exactly the work they'd want to do. Not the public, who get flawless reproductions instead of the real thing. The only party that clearly benefits is the evidence itself. 29,000 years of undisturbed bone and stone, protected from the exact fate that hit Lascaux, at the direct cost of the answers science could otherwise pull out of it. That's not corruption, it's not a cover-up. It's a trade-off made deliberately, and very few archaeological sites on Earth are forced to make it this completely. Scientists want the genome. The Heritage Office wants the bone left exactly where it has lain for 29,000 years. That debate quietly reopens every year in permit renewals nobody outside the field will ever read, and every year so far, the walls win. In 2025, the public got the closest thing to an answer France seems willing to give. A free exhibition in the town of Le Buisson de Cadouin, filled with high-resolution reproductions and digital reconstructions of the cave's art. Visitors can walk past a perfect copy of the 4-meter bison. They cannot walk past the original, they cannot see the skeleton curled inside the bear nest, or the footprint still pressed into 30,000-year-old clay. The real cave stays sealed, opened for a handful of weeks a year, to a small research team working under artificial light, photographing what they are legally forbidden to touch. So here's where the accepted version of Ice Age life actually stands now. It isn't destroyed, it isn't proven false, but it's no longer simple. Ice Age people did not always keep their art and their dead in separate worlds. At least once, in one cave in southwestern France, they appear to have treated them as the same sacred act, carved stone and curled bone built into a single ceremony that we can only reconstruct from the outside through radiocarbon dates, bone geometry, and footprints pressed into ancient dust. That doesn't confirm every detail of the sanctuary theory. It doesn't prove the initiation ritual or explain exactly what the ceremony meant to the people performing it. But it makes the old, comfortable division, art in one place, death in another, considerably harder to defend. Somewhere in the Dordogne right now, behind a rockfall resealed by human choice rather than geology, a young adult still lies face down in a hollow, a cave bear dug out long before any human ever found it. A 4-meter bison still curves across the wall above, cut by hands that may have carried that body into place. Researchers get 3 hours at a stretch, a few weeks a year, forbidden to lift a single bone or take a single sample home. 29,000 years ago, someone finished a ceremony in that darkness and walked back out, careful in soft-soled shoes, not to disturb what they had left behind. Nobody alive has ever fully understood what that ceremony meant. The bones can't speak, the DNA won't be tested, the rock stays sealed. And under the terms France has chosen, deliberately, one careful decision at a time, maybe nobody ever will.